My name is Susan Porter, and for a long time, I thought there was something wrong with me. I wasn't rebellious, I didn't smoke behind the school gym, I didn't lie, and I didn't run away from home. I was, in fact, the daughter every parent says they wish they had, responsible, dedicated, polite. But for some reason I never understood. Nothing I did was ever enough. And little by little, the feeling of inadequacy began to scream inside of me. For years, I wondered what was missing. Was it my hair? Too straight? Too dark? Or my way of speaking? Did I not laugh enough? Or did I laugh too much? Maybe my voice was annoying. Maybe it was the fact that I was the oldest, and he was already tired of being a father when I was born. But no matter how many hypotheses I came up with, one thing was clear. My father's love was not a place I was allowed to inhabit. It was a house with locked doors, except for my brothers, Mark and Kyle. Mark was the prodigy with numbers. He sold lollipops at school since he was 8, wrote down the profits in a little notebook, and said he would be the next owner of the world. Kyle was the athletic prodigy, tall, handsome, talented. He made three-point shots with his eyes closed and dated the cheerleader like life was a badly written teen comedy. And me? I wrote short stories. I won contests. Once I won a statewide essay competition and was invited to read my text on the local radio. I remember how excited I was that morning, how I wore my best outfit, a floral shirt my mother said made me look like an intelligent girl, and walked down the stairs with my heart racing. My father was in the kitchen, reading the newspaper, the coffee still steaming in his cup. I smiled and said with all the pride I could muster, "Dad, I was chosen to read my essay on the radio today. It will air at 10. He didn't take his eyes off the pages. "Oh, that's nice. You can tell me about it later." "Later," he said, as if it were a weather report. That same week, Kyle made a dunk in a school game. A dunk. And my father was over the moon. "Did you see that, Mark? What a jump! This kid's gonna get an athlete's scholarship. He's gonna take that last name to the top." I was there too, with my medal around my neck, but no one noticed. No one ever noticed. On another occasion, when I was 16, I received a letter from a small publisher interested in publishing a collection of my short stories. I remember how my hands trembled holding that envelope. I barely slept the night before, imagining his reaction. "Dad, look at this. A publisher wants to publish my writing. My writing." He took the letter, skimmed it, and handed it back with a shrug. "Those publishers charge to print this stuff, right? Better not fall for those scams, Susan." It hurt. How much it hurt. Every time he belittled one of my accomplishments, it felt like he erased another part of me. Until the day I was accepted into college. First place in business administration. Studying alone, with borrowed books and sleepless nights. I came home as if I were walking on clouds. "Dad, I got in! First place!" He didn't even lower the newspaper. "Cool, Susan. Remind me to take a look at that later." That night, I went to bed with the sound of Kyle's game echoing through the house. My father was yelling from the bleachers as if he were narrating an NBA final. "That's it, my boy. What a play. He's going far, huh? Did everyone see that?" I saw everything. Too much. It wasn't just pride. It was idolization. It was love shouted out loud, given away like a birthday favor. But I never received mine. I tried to understand. I tried to justify it. Oh, maybe he's closer to the boys because they play basketball and he likes sports. But what about me? What about when he taught me to ride a bike? When I cried from pain and he rubbed my head? That father seemed to have evaporated. One day, my mother said to me, trying to be kind, "Your dad is like that, Susie. He doesn't know how to show it, but he loves you, in his own way." And I believed it for a while, until I realized that in his own way was just a euphemism for neglect. I had to learn to applaud myself, to clap for myself on the nights when I delivered a school project and received a, okay, while the boys got pizza for scoring a goal. But none of the wounds hurt as much as a conversation I overheard by accident. I was in the hallway, heading to my room, when I heard my father talking to a friend on the phone. "Oh, the boys are my pride, man. Mark is so smart, always thinking about numbers. And Kyle? This kid's gonna be a star, mark my words. Susan? Oh, she She's just there, trying to be someone a bit too dreamy. But she's a good girl. Good girl. It sounded like pity. Like, she exists and that's all. I went to my room and cried in silence, as I always did. It was there, in the depths of that well of invisibility, that something began to twist inside of me. A part of me, small, almost imperceptible, started to die. It wasn't the part that sought love. That one was already exhausted. What was born in its place was something darker, a quiet desire, growing like a weed among the ruins of my self-esteem. No, I didn't want to kill him. I didn't want revenge in the literal sense. But I wanted him to see me, to know who I was, to understand what he had lost. Little by little, that feeling turned into a silent pact. One day he'll see me. He'll see everything he ignored. He'll remember every time he put me down. And in that pact, I buried the girl who just wanted to be loved, and planted the woman who would one day be impossible to ignore. And it was there, in the darkness of my own home, that a silent desire was born. Not for love, but for revenge. At 18, I packed my bags in heavy silence, almost ceremoniously. It was a muggy morning in Tampa, the kind of heat that seems to stick to your skin and your thoughts. I remember exactly the faded bedspread on my bed, the blue suitcase with a zipper that was a bit stuck, and the muffled sound of the fan slowly spinning on the ceiling of the room. Every movement I made seemed to echo in the emptiness of that house that had never truly embraced me. There were no shouts, no dramatic tears. I didn't slam the door, nor did I leave emotional notes. Just a decision that had been brewing inside of me for years, like a fruit too bitter to be picked before its time. When I went down the stairs with the suitcase in hand, my father was in the same spot as always, leaning against the kitchen doorframe with a cup of coffee in his hand and the newspaper open. He didn't look up. He didn't ask why I was carrying everything I had. "Dad." My voice came out firmer than I expected. "I'm leaving." He flipped another page of the newspaper as if I had said I was going to the store. "Where are you going?" "Out. I got an apartment in the city. I got a job at a restaurant. I'm starting college, too." Silence. He took a sip of his coffee, put the newspaper down on the table. For a second, a mere second, I thought he might say something like, "Are you sure? You'll miss your bed?" Or even, "Take a jacket, it gets cold at night." But all I heard was, "Good luck out there, Susan. The world isn't easy for people who don't have talent." That sentence fell to the kitchen floor like porcelain shattering. I felt the crack inside me. Like something very old and very fragile had finally broken. I didn't answer. I didn't cry. I just turned my back, grabbed my suitcase, and shut the door behind me. The latch clicked softly, like a period at the end of a sentence. But the story had only just begun. The first place I lived was tiny. A studio apartment with mold in the corners, leaky faucets, and a single bed with a mattress sagging in the middle. The walls were so thin that I could hear the neighbor next door arguing with her husband almost every night. Sometimes I'd lie down and wonder if this was really my life now, or just some kind of purgatory between abandonment and a fresh start. I worked as a waitress in a 24-hour diner. Long shifts, drunk customers, blisters on my feet, and a sore back. Fake smiles, small tips. But it was mine. My effort, my sweat. During the day, I studied business at the community college. I slept between buses with my textbook on my lap and my head against the window. Many times I cried in that greasy-stained uniform, hidden behind the counter, swallowing the taste of cold coffee and frustration. But the pain also became a kind of fuel. Every sleepless night, every humiliation at work, every doubt about myself, all of that turned into a foundation. At 21, I started interning at a local tech company. I knew almost nothing, but I was quick to learn and had a hunger that no one could ignore. With the little I earned, I saved enough to start a micro startup with a friend from college. Just the two of us, 2 used laptops, an unstable Wi-Fi connection, and the certainty that no one was going to hand us anything on a silver platter. There were nights when the power was cut off. We ate instant noodles in the dark, laughing at our misery to keep from crying. But we were stubborn. The company grew in fits and starts. We traded the kitchen table for a co-working space, then a tiny office, then 1 employee, then 5. At 24, the failure who left home with a suitcase and a broken heart was now the CEO of her own company. Irony or justice? Maybe a little of both. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, my family, nothing. No phone calls, no messages, not even a happy birthday out of habit. It was as if I had been erased from the map, as if my existence had been a mistake that needed correcting. Mark and Kyle, of course, continued to shine. Every now and then, someone from school would tag me in old posts on Facebook. Kyle Porter, star of the college team. Mark Porter signs with a big bank. The last name Porter continued to shine, just not with me. I could have sent a message. I could have called, shown up for a Sunday lunch like nothing had changed. But why? To hear again that I was trying to be someone? To pretend it didn't hurt? My therapist tried to bring this up several times. You should try to forgive, Susan. Holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. They erased me from their lives, doctor. I'm just returning the favor. And does that make you feel better? No, but it keeps me standing. She looked at me with that knowing gaze, the kind that knows there's a deep pain behind the anger, one that can't be reached with just words, but I wasn't ready to dig. Not yet. So I lived my life my way. I worked, I grew, I traveled, I met incredible people, I made alliances, I made mistakes, I succeeded, I fell, I got back up, I bought my first car, my first apartment, I hired a team. I was on the cover of a local magazine as a young, promising entrepreneur. And still, they didn't know. And you know what? That started to please me. There was something addictive about building an empire in the dark, as if every brick was also building a wall between me and the past. They didn't know me, and I owed them nothing. But fate? Oh, fate. It has that cruel, sharp sense of humor. It waits for the right moment. It doesn't need to rush. It watches us remake ourselves, rebuild. And when we least expect it, it offers the knife and whispers in our ear, "Now it's your turn." And that's how it gave me the perfect chance to be remembered. And I wouldn't let it slip away. It was his birthday. 6 years without looking my father in the eyes. 6 years without hearing his deep voice casting judgments like sentences. 6 years since I left that house with an old suitcase, a small dream, and a broken heart. But I had a plan. I knew exactly what I was going to do. That idea had been growing inside me for months, like lightning waiting for the right sky to strike. And that day, that damn birthday surrounded by fake smiles and canned compliments, would be the exact moment. My father had always been obsessed with motorcycles, not just any bike, vintage Harley-Davidsons, classic ones, the kind that made more noise than sense. I remember when I was a kid sitting on the garage door frame listening to him talk about the 1983 FXSB lowrider as if he were describing a woman who broke his heart. "That bike had a soul, Susan," he'd say, wiping a wrench with a rag soaked in grease. She understood me. We communicated through the roar of the engine. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant by that. Now I do. He communicated with machines, not with people, not with daughters. So, I bought one. A 1983 Harley, fully restored, deep burgundy paint, with a shine so intense it reflected the city lights like a liquid jewel. The engine roared with that deep metallic sound, a kind of contained thunder, like a warning. It was more than a bike. It was a symbol. It was his answer written with my hands. On the day of the party, I wore a black leather jacket, dark jeans, and boots with thick soles. It wasn't just an outfit. It was armor. I parked the Harley 3 houses away from the one I once called home. I didn't want anyone to see it yet. I wanted the surprise to hit like a punch to the stomach, the kind of blow that doesn't give you time to breathe before you hit the ground. The engine silenced. The echo of my footsteps on the empty sidewalk mixed with the muffled sound of music escaping through the walls of the house. It was a grotesquely happy soundtrack from people who didn't know the pain that pulsed behind the door. I entered through the back door. The same entrance I used as a teenager, escaping from arguments, from silences. It was like walking through a scar. The same stained tile, the same smell of fried onions and apple pie mixed together, the same sound of the TV blaring too loud. The house was full. Actually, it was packed. Cousins I barely recognized. Uncles who once taught me how to play dominoes and then forgot I existed. Nosy neighbors with their rehearsed smiles and passive-aggressive comments. Everyone dressed in their best version for that annual theater. Dark blue and silver balloons hanging from the ceiling. A happy birthday Jackson banner over the fireplace. Laughter everywhere. Loose conversations. No one saw me enter at first. I moved like a shadow, an old memory haunting that perfectly fake environment. Then someone saw me. A cousin. Clara, I think. Her eyes widened for a second, as if she had seen a ghost. Susan? The name echoed softly. Subtle. But enough to silence the room in waves. Heads started to turn, one by one. Eyes scanned my presence like spotlights searching for a threat. And finally, he saw me. Jackson Porter. My father. He was sitting in his usual armchair, the old brown leather one that he never let anyone use. It was more than just a piece of furniture. It was a throne, an altar, and he, the high priest of a cult that only accepted two children on the podium, Mark and Kyle. He held a long neck beer. His light blue shirt was buttoned up to the second-to-last button. His eyebrows arched slightly, but he didn't stand up. Not a step. "Well, look who decided to show up after all these years," he said, with his usual raspy voice. The words were dry, like glass breaking underfoot. The people around looked at each other, some with awkward smiles, others clearly savoring the discomfort of others. I smiled. A small smile. Surgical. A clean cut. "Hi, Dad. I thought you had disappeared. Thought you had more important things to do than remember your own family. I thought the family had forgotten about me, actually." My voice came out low, but firm. "I'm just returning the favor." Mark appeared out of nowhere, always the first to show up when the spotlight turns on. He wore a white dress shirt and beige pants. He had that rehearsed smile, the kind of smile that comes from learning to perform success since early on. "Susan, wow, it's been so long. You look different." "New hair," I murmured. "And a new life, too." "Oh, that's great." He gave me 2 pats on the back like I was a colleague who had returned after a long absence. "We were just talking about my new position. I got promoted to general manager at the bank. Now I'm handling investment portfolios. I'm even thinking about starting my own firm." "And Kyle?" Someone yelled from the back. Kyle appeared on the other side of the room, a soda in hand, wearing a sports shirt embroidered with the name of a university from North Carolina. "I got an offer to be an assistant coach for the college team. It's the first step to a full career as a coach. Never thought I'd get this far, but here we are, right?" "These boys are my pride," my father said, loud enough for everyone to hear. He raised his beer bottle like he was toasting to the perfection of his sons. "Always focused, disciplined, determined. They make me proud every single day." He then turned his face in my direction. The smile disappeared. The hand holding the beer bottle lowered slightly. "Just can't say the same about my failed daughter." Silence. For a second, the only sound was the hum of the ceiling fan. Then came the laughter. Not all at once. First, a muffled laugh from an uncle, then the nervous chuckle of a neighbor. And then it spread, like an infection. Like a fire spreading across the dry field of my dignity. The laughter pierced through me like knives. And it wasn't just the sound. It was the way they looked at me while laughing. Like I was the problematic relative they tolerated once a year. Like my presence was a tasteless joke. But I didn't move. I stood there. Still. The smile glued to my face. But now it was different. It was the smile of someone who watches their enemy laugh seconds before the fall. Because I knew. I knew they would choke on that laugh in less than 2 minutes. I knew the loudest laugh would be the first to disappear. I knew that brown leather throne would lose its king soon. And more than anything, I knew no one there was prepared for who I had become, because the real birthday gift was still waiting. I slowly stood up. The gesture wasn't impulsive, nor dramatic. It was calculated, like the ticking of an old clock at the exact minute. The leather of the armchair creaked under my body, and the discreet sound seemed louder than all the chatter from the gathered party. Within seconds, the room was swallowed by a sudden silence, almost respectful, as if all the laughter and conversation had been ripped from the atmosphere by an invisible force. I could feel the eyes on me. Dozens of them. Family, acquaintances, strangers with the same blood. Some looked at me with surprise, others with that concealed mockery I had grown so accustomed to in my life. But the only gaze that mattered was one. His. Jackson Porter, my father, still sitting in his armchair like a monarch on his throne. The beer in his left hand, his fingers tapping on the glass as if pretending disinterest, but on the verge of sinking into an avalanche of doubt. I walked toward him with slow, deliberate steps. Each footfall resonated like an invisible hammer striking against the false structure of that party. I stopped a few meters away. I pulled a white envelope from the side pocket of my leather bag. It was simple, without any markings. Only the weight of what it carried inside gave it significance. I raised the envelope, and with a voice low, clear as a scalpel cutting through flesh, "I brought a gift, Father." The sentence floated in the air, cold and dense. My fingers held the envelope lightly, but inside me, my heart was pounding like a misfiring engine ready to explode. I extended my arm. He didn't move immediately. He looked at the envelope as if it were a snake coiled in white paper. Then he leaned forward, slowly, and took the gift from my hands. He twirled the envelope between his fingers as if trying to guess its contents by touch. His eyes never left mine. "What's in here?" he asked with a crooked laugh, almost mocking. $100 bill? A meal voucher from that cafeteria you used to work at?" A few discreet laughs popped up at the edges of the room, coming from relatives who only knew how to laugh when someone else stumbled. I responded without moving, without blinking. "There's something much better. Something you'll keep for the rest of your life." He let out a dry laugh. He tore the envelope open with a practiced finger and pulled out the contents. 3 precisely folded pages. As he opened it, his eyes immediately fell on the top of the first page, where the company's crest dominated the space with embossed golden letters. I watched as he read the first line. I saw the crease on his forehead form, as if a math problem had suddenly appeared in front of him. He followed his eyes over the words. A lengthy contract, filled with clauses, legal names, and authenticity seals. He blinked once, then again. He turned to the second page, read more, then went back to the first. The laughter disappeared. His hands, so firm just moments before, began to tremble lightly. A real discomfort took over his face, as if the ground beneath him were giving way without warning. He scanned the header again, read the signature at the end. He read the name of the new owner, my name. The room, once silent, turned into an atmosphere of pure tension, the kind of silence that precedes a storm or a car crash. Everyone present began to sense that something was happening, even without seeing the content of the paper, even without understanding exactly what was being revealed. There was a palpable shift in the air. My Uncle Ronaldo, who couldn't keep his curiosity for even a minute, leaned to the side with a whiskey glass in his hand and asked, "What's up, Benny? Are you feeling sick?" No response. "Come on, speak up," Aunt Elaine insisted, narrowing her eyes suspiciously. "What's in that paper?" He swallowed hard, lowered the paper to his lap. His eyes were lost, unfocused. Finally, he murmured, almost as if speaking to himself, It's the acquisition contract for the company I work for. Metalcraft. It's been bought." The sentence fell like a lightning bolt in the middle of the room. That name, Metalcraft, was known to everyone present. It was almost an alternate surname for our family. It was the company where my father worked for over 30 years, where he built his reputation as a senior engineer, where he spent nights, weekends, and sacrificed his personal life, including fatherhood. The surprise was so intense that even the old neighbor Edgar, nearly deaf, took out his hearing aid to make sure he'd heard right. It was then that I took a step forward. Just enough so that he wouldn't have to search for me with his eyes. Now, we were face to face, for the first time in years. His eyes locked on mine. There was no anger, no pride, just the purest disbelief. I tilted my head slightly and said, "And guess who the new owner is?" The silence that followed was different from the first. This one was almost painful. It was the kind of silence that makes your eardrums burn, that fills every corner of the soul with suffocating expectation. No one dared to breathe loudly. My father's eyes flickered. He blinked. His hand still held the contract, now lightly crumpling the edges of the paper. The beer he had held so confidently slipped from his fingers and fell to the carpet, spilling slowly, like an open wound on the floor of the room. No one dared to move, and then, with a firm voice, looking directly at him, "That's right, the failed daughter." The words exploded in the air like gunpowder. The faces around contorted in a mix of shock and embarrassment. Mark, my brother, put his hand to his forehead as if trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. Kyle muttered a curse under his breath, almost imperceptible. One of the aunts covered her mouth with her hand. A cousin dropped his champagne glass to the floor, but no one looked. All eyes were on me. And him. And he simply sank into the armchair as if he had aged 20 years in 2 minutes. The man, once haughty, sarcastic, almost cruel, now seemed to shrink inside his own body. The wrinkles on his forehead, around his mouth, deepened. His trembling hand, his chest heaving. It was as if the world, his world, had been redrawn without his consent. I could almost hear the sound of his mental structures crumbling. It was the breaking of a myth. The collapse of a private empire built with bricks of pride and cement of denial. "But how?" Aunt Elaine stammered. But no one answered. No one could answer. Because the answer was too absurd to be digested all at once. Because it wasn't just about a business acquisition. It was about an entire narrative turned upside down. It was about the invisible, ignored, ridiculed daughter who returned not as a beggar, not as an ingrate, but as the owner. I never wanted to destroy my father. I was never driven by the desire to see him on his knees, nor by a blind thirst for revenge. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about recognition. It always was. I just wanted him to see me. Really see me. The little girl who tried to show a perfect report card at dinner while he praised Kyle's points in the basketball game. The teenager who handed over her first science fair trophy with a shy smile, only to receive a pat on the back, while he proudly posted Mark's swimming medal on Facebook. The young woman, at 17, who started putting together a business plan in her dark room while hearing, from the hallway, his laughter commenting how, "Daughters are always a silent disappointment." But see, he saw. He saw my strength, my intelligence, my rise. Just too late. When seeing was no longer a gift, but a burden. He was still sitting, the crumpled envelope on his lap, the contract papers slipping through his fingers, as if they weren't real. He tried to piece together the remnants of the world version he had created for himself. That comfortable universe where his sons were the heroes, and his daughter was just a well-dressed mistake. "You..." His voice came out harsh, almost choked. "You bought the company? How?" The question he had always avoided asking. How? That simple word that could have changed everything if he had used it before. "How are you, Susan? How was your day? How did you do all of this without anyone's help?" "With effort," I replied, looking him in the eyes. The same one you never saw. That response wasn't a knife. It was a key, unlocking doors he had locked for convenience. Each word was a memory of years of silence, swallowed words, family gatherings where I was a blur at the back of the photo. I looked around. The room seemed frozen in time. No sound, no laughter. The smiles melted off faces. The uncle who always cracked jokes was now fiddling with his shirt collar. The cousin who constantly posted motivational quotes on Instagram stared at the floor. And the two brothers? Kyle and Mark? One was pale, the other with clenched fists. They didn't know whether to feel shame or fear. I was the invisible woman who had become a giant shadow. And now, everyone was beneath it. You said I had no talent. My voice was firm, but not angry. It was the voice of someone who survived a shipwreck and came back swimming. Now I'm the boss of your boss. He raised his eyes. But there was something different in them. It wasn't arrogance. It was exhaustion. It was a crack, like an ancient sculpture beginning to crumble at the edges. And do you know what's better? I continued, calmly crossing my arms. I don't need your approval. Never did. Silence. Dense. Like the air had turned into a viscous liquid filling everyone's lungs in that room. He lowered his eyes. For the first time in my life, Benny Porter, my father, the man who laughed loudly and always had a ready answer, was silent. Not silent from pride, but from absence. As if, in that moment, he had seen himself inside and didn't like what he saw. His silence was the confession I never thought I'd hear. It was proof that, no matter how much he denied it, he knew. He always knew. He just didn't want to admit it. He preferred to keep the myth that the male children were the chosen ones, the strong ones, the worthy ones. And me? I was the reminder of everything he didn't understand. Of the silent strength, the intelligence that made no noise, the success that's built without an audience. In the background, I heard the click of the fridge closing. Someone was trying to act normal. They failed. My eyes scanned the room one last time. I saw faces in shock, in silence, in discomfort, but I also saw something else. Fear. Not of me, but of what I represented now. I was the rewriting of a story they had told for years. And rewriting stories hurts. By the fireplace, I saw the old family photo. Me, small, in the corner, almost cut off by the frame. And on the other side, the smiling father with his arms over the boy's shoulders. Irony. Now I was in the center of the room, and he was in the corner, almost erased by his own lack of action. But I wasn't done yet. There was still something that needed to be said. Something I carried for years, like a burden in my bones, like a scream in my lungs. Something that didn't fit into quick words or million-dollar contracts. It was deeper, more human. And outside the house, parked under the Tampa sun, was a brand new Harley-Davidson. Its roar still echoed in my mind like a harbinger of what was to come. I left the room as someone leaving an arena. The doors behind me slammed shut with a dull thud, muffling the weight of the tension I was leaving behind. Each step on the porch wood was a release. The night in Tampa, still warm despite the breeze, wrapped around me in an embrace that felt unprecedented. The wind caressed my face as if to say, "Now you're free." My boots echoed across the concrete entryway to the sidewalk. The amber light from the street lamp on the corner cut my shadow onto the ground, and there, waiting like a faithful dog, was she, my Harley-Davidson, black, gleaming, with chrome details that sparkled under the streetlight. The kind of gift a man like my father would dream of having his entire life. But it was mine. It was the symbol of my broken silence, my name shouted without needing to raise my voice. I pressed the ignition button, and in an instant, the engine roared with the power of 1,000 repressed memories. A full, proud sound that filled the night like thunder. The Harley pulsed beneath my legs like my heart in that moment. Alive, furious, impossible to ignore. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow. Dragging. And soon the sound of the screen door creaked open with an almost tragic delicacy. I turned, already knowing. He was there. Benny Porter, my father. Standing on the porch of the house he helped build and, ironically, also destroy. His hands stuffed in the pockets of his worn jeans, his chest rising slowly, but his slumped shoulders told another story. A story he wasn't ready to admit, but in that second, his body told it for him. He didn't say anything. No apologies. No, I was wrong. No request for forgiveness stumbling through his throat like in the movies he loved watching, when he thought redemption was something that only happened on screen. But his eyes. Oh, his eyes said everything. Those brown eyes that I had learned not to search for anymore, which for years seemed dull when they looked at me, were now different. There was something there that I had never seen. It wasn't pure regret. It was something deeper. It was a silent recognition, mixed with a pain he didn't know how to name. As if, at last, he understood the intimate tragedy of having neglected a daughter who just wanted to be noticed. The two worlds, his and mine, were face to face. Not like before, where he looked down on me, but at an equal height. No, maybe not even that. Because in that instant, I was above. Not in arrogant superiority, but in dignity. He took a step forward, but stopped right there, at the edge of the porch, as if there were an invisible line he couldn't cross anymore. The pride that had kept him from approaching now also kept him from fleeing. That's when I broke the silence. Goodbye, Dad. My words came out without trembling, without hesitation. Just truth, pure and painful. A goodbye that had been building for years, even without my knowing. He didn't answer. He just slightly tilted his head, almost imperceptibly. Maybe a nod. Maybe a sorry disguised as a gesture. I slowly put on the helmet like a ritual. My fingers tightened the strap under my chin. I took a deep breath. When I turned the key, the Harley responded like a beast waking up. The roar louder than before, as if it knew that it wasn't just an engine starting, but a cycle closing. I didn't look back, because in that moment it wasn't about him. It was about me. It wasn't about money. It never was. Nor about status. Not even about winning. Because winning is relative, and often empty. No. That was about something no one inside that house understood in time. Respect. The respect that was denied to me, torn from me, ridiculed for years. The respect that made me believe I had to beg to receive. That told me I needed to earn it, when in reality, I always had it. And now he had to swallow every bitter word he spit out over the years. Every time he called me misfit, every time he compared my accomplishments to the boys', every time he looked over my head as if I weren't there. Revenge didn't come in screams. It came in silence, in the sound of the engine, in the dust the bike kicked up as it left, in the emptiness that remained on the porch after I departed. The Harley and I, two forces he could never ignore again, and the road ahead, it never felt so much mine. Have you ever felt like this about your parents? Ever felt like you did everything to be seen, recognized, and still were treated as if your efforts were invisible? Like the love and validation you longed for were always out of reach? Sometimes we search so hard for their approval, but we forget that often the greatest validation comes from within ourselves. We don't need anyone's approval to feel complete. What happens when we finally stop seeking that validation and begin to recognize our own strength? If this story touched your heart and made you reflect on your own journey, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the power of revenge and overcoming obstacles. And if you're ready for another intense journey, click the video on the screen and discover another tale of feminine revenge that will keep you hooked. Don't miss it.